My photo taste is the Pinterest, because they are the best.
Our website. News review from BBC Learning English. Hello and welcome to News Review, the programme where we show you how to use the language from the latest news stories in your everyday English. Hi, I'm Neil. Joining me today is Catherine. Hello, Catherine.
Hello, Neil.
We've got a story today about something you love.
Well, the story's about football, and we're talking about a proposed change to football and whether we actually need even more of it.
Wow. Let's find out more from this BBC World Service News Bulletin.
Football's world governing body FIFA is expected to approve plans to expand the World Cup from 32 to 48 teams. If confirmed, the new format will be introduced from 2026. The bulk of the additional slots are likely to go to African and Asian countries.
So there we are. The World Cup is about to get even bigger. FIFA is expected to approve plans to increase the number of teams playing in the finals from 32 to 48, and most of the extra teams are going to come from Africa or Asia.
Okay, well, you've been looking at this story online, and there are some words and expressions which are useful for talking about it.
Yes, this story's been widely covered, and 3 words that I found for us today are the bulk of, facelift, and set to.
The bulk of, facelift, and set to. So how does that first one, the bulk of, appear in the headlines? We heard it in the bulletin, actually, but how is it appearing in the headlines?
Yeah, we've got it on the BBC Sport website. The headline is World Cup, FIFA set to vote on Gianni Infantino's 48-team plan. And in the story, it tells us that the bulk of the 16 extra places expected to go to Africa and Asia. So the bulk of.
The bulk of meaning most or the majority of something, but not just a simple majority.
No, it's got to be a significant majority. It really does mean most. So we're looking at these 16 teams.
Yeah.
The bulk of them would be a minimum of about 12, possibly 14 or 15.
Yeah. So the vast majority.
The vast majority, yes. So bulk means it's about size, really. It's a word about size. You can talk about a bulky person, somebody who's quite large, maybe like a rugby player.
As an adjective, bulky.
Exactly that. You can have a bulky parcel, shopping. If you've got a big shopping bag and you can't carry it because it's so big and difficult to manage, it's bulky.
Talking of shopping.
Yes.
I do the bulk of my shopping online.
So most of your shopping you do online.
Yeah.
Bits and pieces from the supermarket.
Yeah. And another use of the word bulk in relation to shopping is bulk buying.
Bulk buying, where you buy most of your... Yes, go on, bulk buying.
Well, Catherine, you told me earlier on that your house is pretty much full of tins of cat food.
Not my entire house, Neil, but I will confess that I do go online about every 6 months and I buy a lot of cat food. It all gets delivered and I put it in a cupboard, not my entire house. I have a cat food cupboard which has 6 months' supply of cat food, and I buy it once every 6 months. It's called bulk buying.
Yeah, so if you buy in bulk, you can call it bulk buying.
You can, and I do it because it's cheaper.
Incredible.
Incredible bulk.
The incredible bulk. Moving on to our next word.
Yes, so the next word we have is facelift, and if we look on CNN, World Cup, FIFA confirm 48-team expansion, and the story tells us one of the world's biggest sporting festivals is set for a major facelift.
A facelift.
Facelift.
Now I'm confused here. I thought a facelift was a kind of operation that sort of aging celebrities have in order to make them look younger.
Yes, that is exactly it. An operation where a surgeon takes your skin on your face, lifts it up, tidies it away behind your head somehow, and makes you look hopefully younger and more beautiful, sometimes just a bit strange, frankly. Okay. But facelift means making some changes so that there is an improvement.
Okay, so it's being used here figuratively.
Very figuratively,
We're not talking about the players having special operations.
Well, maybe they are, but that's not what we're talking about here. It's the World Cup changing slightly so that it's better.
Yeah, okay. And
we can use it in everyday life to talk about things that we change. So Buildings, for example.
Yeah, buildings. And this program, in fact, we a while ago we decided that we could improve it, make it better. We changed a couple of things.
Yeah.
We put text on the screen.
Yeah.
We gave News Review a facelift.
We gave News Review a little facelift, which has worked very well, in my opinion.
Yes, it looks much younger.
It does, yes.
Next, we have Set 2.
Okay, so let's look at the Guardian newspaper, the Guardian website, I should say. Gianni Infantino's 48-team World Cup plan set to be approved by FIFA.
Okay, well, this obviously has sort of future meaning to start doing something, to put a plan immediately in place.
Yep, absolutely.
But it's used a lot, isn't it, in headlines?
It's used a lot in headlines. We don't use it in everyday English. You don't say, after this programme, I'm set to have lunch.
That would sound really weird.
It would sound very strange. But it means you're going to do something because you've made all the plans and preparations. Headline newspaper writers love it because it's really, really short. It says what it needs to say. It's very journalistic. There are some ways we can use set to, though, in everyday English.
Yeah, for example, I am going on holiday tomorrow.
Yeah.
And
You got everything ready?
yeah, I've got the bags are packed.
Yeah.
I'm ready to go.
Yeah.
I've got my passport ready, the taxi's booked.
Yeah, everything's
Everything's
organised.
ready. I'm set to go.
Set to leave.
Yeah.
And have you set your alarm clock?
I have. I've set my alarm. It's set to go off at 4 a.m.
Excellent.
Early flight.
Okay, good.
Unfortunately, none of that was true, but it did.
But you are having a
demonstrate.
facelift.
I am indeed having a facelift. Okay, before this becomes even stranger, I think we should go to our Facebook challenge. We've been talking about football, and I asked which of these expressions from football is used generally to mean begin. And is it A, shoot out, B, send off, or C, kick off? Pretty easy this week.
And that's what everybody said, yes. I don't think anybody got the wrong answer. The answer was, of course, C, kick-off. So well done, Farah Faris, Chico Chagas, and Jesh Warner, and Raki Qureshi, who all said kick-off, and everybody else who got the correct answer.
Brilliant, well done. And could you please now just recap the words we've looked at?
I
this
can.
program?
So we looked at the bulk of, which means the most or the majority, facelift, a change that improves something, and set to, which means organise so that something happens in the future.
Excellent. And if you would like to test yourself on today's vocabulary, there's a quiz that you can take on our website, bbclearningenglish.com, where you can find all sorts of other materials to help you improve your English. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
My photo taste is the Pinterest, because the are the best. Flick to link, link to flick.
To try something new. Those of you who are able, please stand up. Okay, so I'm gonna name some names. When you hear a name that you don't recognize, you can't tell me anything about them, I'd like you to take a seat and stay seated. The last person standing, we're gonna see what they know, okay? All right. Eric Garner. Mike Brown, Tamir Rice, Freddie Gray. So those of you who are still standing, I'd like you to turn around and take a look. I'd say half to most of the people are still standing. So let's continue. Michelle Cusseau. Tanisha Anderson. Ara Russer. Megan Hockaday. So if we look around again, there are about 4 people still standing. And actually, I'm not going to put you on the spot. I just say that to encourage transparency, so you can be seated. So those of you who recognize the first group of names know that these were African Americans who've been killed by the police over the last 2.5 years. What you may not know is that the other list is also African Americans who have been killed within the last 2 years. Only one thing distinguishes the names that you know from the names that you don't know: gender. So let me first let you know that there's nothing at all distinct about this audience that explains the pattern of recognition that we've just seen. I've done this exercise dozens of times around the country. I've done it to women's rights organizations. I've done it with civil rights groups. I've done it with professors. I've done it with students. I've done it with psychologists. I've done it with sociologists. I've done it even with progressive members of Congress. And everywhere, the awareness of the level of police violence that Black women experience is exceedingly low. Now, it is surprising, isn't it, that this would be the case? I mean, there are 2 issues involved here. There's police violence against African Americans, and there's violence against women. 2 issues that have been talked about a lot lately. But when we think about who is implicated by these problems, when we think about who's victimized by these problems, the names of these Black women never come to mind. Now, communications experts tell us that when facts do not fit with the available frames, people have a difficult time incorporating new facts into their way of thinking about a problem. These women's names have slipped through our consciousness because there are no frames for us to see them, no frames for us to remember them, no frames for us to hold them. As a consequence, reporters don't lead with them, policymakers don't think about them, and politicians aren't encouraged or demanded that they speak to them. Now, you might ask, well, why does a frame matter? I mean, after all, an issue that affects Black people and an issue that affects women, wouldn't that necessarily include Black people who are women and women who are Black people? Well, the simple answer is that this is a trickle-down approach to social justice, and many times it just doesn't work. Without frames that allow us to see how social problems impact all the members of a targeted group, many will fall through the cracks of our movements, left to suffer in virtual isolation. But it doesn't have to be this way. Many years ago, I began to use the term intersectionality to deal with the fact that many of our social justice problems like racism and sexism are often overlapping, creating multiple levels of social injustice. Now, the experience that gave rise to intersectionality was my chance encounter with a woman named Emma DeGraffenreid. Emma DeGraffenreid was an African-American woman, a working wife, and a mother. I actually read about Emma's story from the pages of a legal opinion written by a judge who had dismissed Emma's claim of race and gender discrimination against a local car manufacturing plant. Emma, like so many African-American women, sought better employment for her family and for others. She wanted to create a better life for her children and for her family. But she applied for a job, and she was not hired, and she believed that she was not hired because she was a Black woman. Now, the judge in question dismissed Emma's suit. And the argument for dismissing the suit was that the employer did hire African Americans and the employer hired women. The real problem, though, that the judge was not willing to acknowledge was what Emma was actually trying to say. that the African Americans that were hired, usually for industrial jobs, maintenance jobs, were all men. And the women that were hired, usually for secretarial or front office work, were all white. Only if the court was able to see how these policies came together would he be able to see the double discrimination that Emma DeGraff and Reed was facing. But the court refused to allow Emma to put two causes of action together to tell her story because he believed that by allowing her to do that, she would be able to have preferential treatment. She'd have an advantage by being able to have two swings at the bat when African American men and white women only had one swing at the bat. But, of course, neither African American men or white women needed to combine a race and gender discrimination claim to tell the story of the discrimination they were experiencing. Why wasn't the real unfairness law's refusal to protect African American women simply because their experiences weren't exactly the same as white women and African American men? Rather than broadening the frame to include African American women, the court simply tossed their case completely out of court. Now, as a student of anti-discrimination law, as a feminist, as an anti-racist, I was struck by this case. It felt to me like injustice squared. So first of all, black women weren't allowed to work at the plant. Second of all, the court doubled down on this exclusion by making it legally inconsequential. And to boot, there was no name for this problem. And we all know that where there's no name for a problem, you can't see a problem. And when you can't see a problem, you pretty much can't solve it. Many years later, I'd come to recognize that the problem that Emma was facing was a framing problem. The frame that the court was using to see gender discrimination or to see race discrimination was partial and it was distorting. For me, the challenge that I faced was trying to figure out whether there was an alternative narrative, a prism that would allow us to see Emma's dilemma, a prism that would allow us to rescue her from the cracks in the law, that would allow judges to see her story. So it occurred to me, maybe a simple analogy to an intersection might allow judges to better see Emma's dilemma. So if we think about this intersection, the roads to the intersection would be the way that the workforce was structured by race and by gender. And then the traffic in those roads would be the hiring policies and the other practices that ran through those roads. Now, because Emma was both black and female, she was positioned precisely where those roads overlapped, experiencing the simultaneous impact of the company's gender and race.
My photo taste is the Pinterest because they are the best.
News review from BBC Learning English. Hello and welcome to News Review, the programme where we show you how to use the language from the latest news stories in your everyday English. Hi, I'm Neil. Joining me today is Catherine. Hello, Catherine.
Hello, Neil.
We've got a story today about something you love.
Well, the story's about football, and we're talking about a proposed change to football and whether we actually need even more of it.
Wow. Let's find out more from this BBC World Service News Bulletin.
Football's world governing body FIFA is expected to approve plans to expand the World Cup from 32 to 48 teams. If confirmed, the new format will be introduced from